welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor of Ultiworld, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, as always, is Ultiworld senior editor Keith Raynor, and we are back from the National Championships in San Diego. It was a mostly sunny, beautiful weekend, and you know what? It may not have been the cleanest competition that we've seen at Nationals, which makes sense given the year, but man, was it exciting. We had so many upsets, so many crazy games, comebacks, and some really brilliant games in the bracket that I think punctuated what makes it such a great weekend, whether you want to talk about the semifinal between Fury and Phoenix or the men's final between Ring and Pony. Lots of great games. And Keith, I can't wait to break it all down. How are you?
I'm doing well. Recovering from the few days that we were out in California. I know I left a little bit early, but it really felt like there was a big buzz around the event itself. You know, I don't always get to experience it both in person and from, you know, the viewership side. And I got a little bit of that. And it felt like, you know, there was a lot of talk about what's going on in Nationals online. Our Discord was super active. I feel like there was a lot of social media posting about the tournament and a lot of excitement about watching the event. I mean, we saw it numerous times be referred to as the most competitive, you know, most challenging tournament to win in the world. And I think it lived up to that standard.
I mean, I think that's like definitely true. What name a tournament that has a more competitive field? You can't.
The World Games.
You know, you talk about the World Champ,
but this doesn't happen every year. Doesn't even happen every year.
But
and it might not be the more
There's
competitive.
like usually two teams that are really, truly highly competitive. And I mean, the U.S. is just too good. They're just too good. And I think the thing about Club Nationals is that you are not going to just win by being the most talented team, the way that you see USA teams win world championships. You know, it takes execution at a really high level in order to win. And not just the one game, you know, at the end of the road, but like 3 or 4 games during the tournament where you're playing teams that are capable of beating you. And so I think it always makes it super exciting. And that it lived up to that this year. Let's just quickly hit the headlines. Your champions this year, the 2021 national champions, Seattle BFG in the mixed division. We'll talk a lot more about them and why they sort of felt like they were a surprise winner, even though if you look at the results from the season, you could really see why they maybe should have been considered one of the favorites to win it. In the women's division, San Francisco Fury, they overcame all odds, Keith. They really did. They you know, nobody saw it coming.
All odds,
and in the men's division, for the very first time as champions, despite however many, 25 plus years they've been at the tournament, Raleigh Ring of Fire takes home a men's division title. They beat New York Pony in the final, Fury topping Brute Squad in the final, and BFG getting the win against Hybrid out of Michigan, a surprise finalist and a very good pick to have in #TheGame if you had them. So, so much to get to. We opened up the door on Twitter to get your questions. We also have mailbag questions, and some people just texted me directly some questions for today's show. Keith, just all the way zoomed out at a high level, this year's champions, do you feel like you're surprised by these winners?
Absolutely. Go back and listen to the pick show. Certainly, I don't think that any of these three teams in a vacuum, I know people have grown to hate that phrase, in a vacuum doesn't feel like a champion. Like they all meet the criteria. So in that sense, no, not necessarily. But, I like to use the picks of the Beat Charlie Challenge as a good barometer of like what the public thinks of teams. And the percentage of entrants who picked BFG to win the mixed division was 9%.
Wow.
As you can imagine, for Fury, that was a lot higher. It was over 50%. That's a big favorite. And in the men's division, Ring of Fire had 58%, or excuse me, had 30%. I think Ring of Fire, they were the second most popular team, But the way that each of the brackets, the paths shook out, where there was pool play, bracket play, I think it was more of a surprising journey necessarily than it was the teams that were left standing at the end. Although all credit to BFG, they definitely were not a team I necessarily saw coming.
And you think about what could have been different. BFG played an incredibly tight game with Mixtape. Could have lost it. Easily could have lost it. Fury almost lost to Phoenix in the semis. Ring should have lost to Revolver. Should have lost a Revolver in pool play and then had to play through pre-quarters, and who knows what could have been different if that had happened. I mean, Revolver had the disc on the goal line on Universe and turned it over on a short little lefty backhand pass on a miscommunication. And then Ring went the other way and won it, and that sparked them on this run. Which, credit to Revolver. I mean, they showed up, and despite being basically in a rebuild, looked fantastic in many of their games.
And yet they didn't make it out of pre-quarters. Deciding about what to say about their tournament. I mean, they went 4-3 and they lost 3 games by a total of 4 points. I don't know what to make of that team still, but they definitely were the real deal. They definitely looked. There's a lot of potential there.
Seeing the body language and hearing from some of the players and coaches after the game against Ring, it felt like they had lost the tournament when they obviously had not. And I think they dreaded the matchup with Machine in pre-quarters, and then Machine showed up and decided to play the one good game they played all weekend and beat them in pre-quarters. But that's what I'm talking about when I say Nationals is so hard to win. So anyway, I mean, it's not like these teams were inevitable. Maybe Fury, but it's not. I mean, Fury, seriously, they did have their first. I was saying this on the sidelines. Their first game against a truly elite opponent all season came in that semifinal against Phoenix. They didn't play until late August. They played Schwa, who I think never really rose, even pre-injuries, to the level of, semifinals elite. And then they played a fairly weakened, Southwest. Wildfire, not quite the same team. Not quite the same team. I mean, still good teams. Don't get me wrong, but not elite teams. And then they get through the cruise through pool play, easy. And then they see Phoenix, and they get up big early, and then Phoenix doesn't roll over and die, which credit to them for that. And it was a tough game. It was a really tough game. And then, of course, they embarrassed Brute Squad in the final.
To me, that was the game of the tournament, I think. I mean, to me, that was the best game that we saw.
No real question.
That was the thrilling semifinal that we're so used to during that semifinal round. I mean, obviously, BFG and Mixtape in the morning, and the morning semifinals sometimes get a short shrift. But yeah, that Phoenix game was incredibly impressive and was the best game of the tournament in my eyes.
I don't even think it was close. I mean, there were some other crazy games, but not many that were played at a high level like that and had like this incredible narrative behind them and were on
the magnitude.
There's like all these things
hard to argue with. I mean,
exactly.
Let's talk about the final in the men's division a little bit too, which was also really close. We get this double game point matchup, and Charlie, I gotta say, I mean, credit to two teams that played a great game. Ring of Fire was a great team, and Pony was a great team. We've already gotten the chirps. We got the chirps in person. I got them from Brian Jones every time I saw him. We got the chirps online. Isaac Saul with his awesome Twitter thread. These are the kind of chirps I love. I mean, this is a great counter chirp at us. And it's a great thread for anybody who hasn't read Isaac Saul's thread. His thoughts on Carl Endzone of Chain Lightning tickled me in particular. But is this the most boring, well-played final that went to double game point that you ever seen? I mean, I was like, man, this is not an exciting game. There were moments, but there was something about that game that just didn't leave me the mouth watering. It was just a bit of a letdown in that way of drama. There's a lack of drama.
It never reached a crescendo for multiple reasons. Okay, number one, both offenses were playing exceptional ultimate. And what that meant was that they were hitting 10-yard under, reset, swing pass, shallow break, 10-yard under, 10-yard under, reset, swing pass, 10-yard under, score at the front cone. And you have to be an ultimate purist to really appreciate that and the level of play, despite incredible effort and skill from both defenses.
Even the away shots felt like they were like wide the heck open half the time because people were timing great cuts.
Nobody was taking chances. Yeah. Nobody was taking chances. And as a result, there was very little misexecution. There were very little 50-50s. We just didn't see the risky play that can make for great moments. What makes Ultimate really exciting, what makes a game exciting, is when someone skies somebody else or makes a really tough contested catch, not when they clap catch by 5 yards or just grind unders. Both teams were fully committed to not turning the disc over. And you saw a first half with only 3 turns from the O-lines and a game that had a very, very few number of big plays. And when they came, the offensive lines got the disc back generally. Yep. So you had that huge layout D from Ring, midway through the second half. And it's like they finally get this turn off Pony. They've been holding the 1-point advantage basically, and it was going back and forth between Tide and a Ring 1-point lead because, of course, Ring received, and we'll talk about that. They get the disc, and then the D-line takes the chance, they take the shot, they challenge Chris Kotcher, who's covering Eric Taylor, and Chris Kotcher somehow makes an absolutely unbelievable defensive play to go over the top of Taylor, avoid heavy contact, and make the block.
That was like the 2 most exciting moments in the game right there, and they came within minutes of each other.
And the thing is, it ended up being ultimately a Pony hold. And so you don't get that, you never got that ratchet. Now, the other problem, Keith, the game got capped at 85 minutes.
Yeah.
So the final score, was it 13-12 or 12-11? 13-12. We didn't get a 15-14. And we got robbed a little bit of what could have been an amazing finish. And we've obviously, 1,000 people have asked the question, what do we do about the caps? This is terrible. One of the things Brian Jones said very first, Coach Pony, in the press conference afterwards, was that the 85-minute cap was a travesty, a disservice to the game. And it's hard to argue with that. I thought it was super disappointing to have the cap times from the pool play be in effect for the semis and finals. And the fact that it was a +1 cap, which I don't really have a problem with that, also sapped some of the build-up to the final moments of the game. There is absolutely no reason that these games should be capped at 85 minutes. I think that they should be capped at 105 minutes. I understand needing a cap of some kind. You can't just let teams play forever. If it all works out until it's super windy and no one can get to 15. You need a cap.
You don't want the whole cap games to 21 days to come back?
No, I do not. And I like having a schedule. The broadcasters need to be able to set up for the next game. There's a lot of reasons where you need a cap. And it's still a soft cap. You got to score to win, which I absolutely love that. But why take away, the defenses ratchet and ratchet and ratchet and ratchet up the pressure. And that's when you get those big moments late in games, is at 13-13 or 14-14. And we didn't get to that. Credit to Ring. They took a timeout to force it into cap so that they would have the last O point, and it would be universe.
And
smart.
Yeah, it is smart. It's just not interesting. It's not interesting to watch. And you're right that the lack of that crescendo, we didn't even get. I don't know if there's a musical term for this, but the part just before the peak and the crescendo, we didn't even get that last build up where you're closing in on 15-15, and that essentially is like the fourth quarter of an Ultimate game when you get to 12-12 or whatnot, and that there's just a few opportunities left in the game. And instead, it feels abrupt when there's a cap all of a sudden. It's like, okay, we're 2 points away from the end of the game, or next point's universe. I agree with Brian that it felt like it did a disservice to the teams. And I'm sure that part of it's that his team came out on the losing end of the flip in that way. So I've heard some conversations about the caps in general. Very few games making it to their final score during the entire tournament. I understand the need for caps, so I'm not saying that, but it may have been a misjudgment to figure out how to apply them in this case.
Well, I just don't understand why we have to stop teams' game at basically 90 minutes.
In the final in particular.
I just don't understand it.
No, but nobody's a fan of that.
It doesn't make sense, especially deep in the bracket. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just like clearly, maybe it's just because it is true. This is the first club nationals since we've changed cap rules from being +2 to +1. And that's fine. But I think that we need to recognize that, no, we want to let teams play out the game as much as possible. You want games to get to 15 if you can. 85 minutes is too short. I mean, that's like a college tournament level of short. This is nationals. Games should go an hour 45. That's fine.
I even heard some griping about...
Nobody is worried about getting, tired, It's like, ooh, we are coming back after COVID. It's been 6 months of competition at this point. Teams want to play out the game and not feel like they're having their games kind of truncated for no reason.
I even heard some griping about +1. Not necessarily from the players, but from onlookers, particularly older players who were saying, you should have to break to win. And in +1, you don't have to. You can just have all holds for a win. So I'm a fan of +1, but I can understand that perspective at least.
It would feel different if the cap was 105, right, as opposed to 85 with the +1. It would feel more like you'd built, if the game is still 12-12 after that much time, you need a cap. So I think it's an easy fix for next time. And, if you need to adjust round times by 15 minutes to make it work, just do it. And we have 4 days to play these games. We can make it happen.
I won't belabor the point, Charlie, but I'll just get it in there. Another nationals where the finals just felt like they had less gravitas than the semifinals. We can't.
Well, let's attack one of these questions then, because I have one for you right there. And the question was, why was the stadium? This is from Eric on Twitter. Why was the stadium so empty during finals? He says at Windmill, the stadium is always packed during finals. A stadium packed with players and fans would be the best thing you could do to make the sport fun to watch and feel the hype. Thoughts?
Well, the reason the stadium's not packed is because a lot of people go home. There's not a lot of incentive to come sit in the sun and watch the games on a Sunday afternoon. There's just not a lot there for players or spectators. Really, it's really difficult to schedule a tournament final and have that be a spectator friendly format. Not being able to pre-schedule your teams and stuff like that makes it hard for fans, obviously. But just in general, I think that, as Eric mentioned, it's oftentimes players who become those fans, the eliminated players. And we're all the old people who used to go to Sarasota. We know what this is like when the field is packed. And I hear people call for that feeling all the time. You get it a little bit at the morning semifinals that are played at the actual tournament site. You can actually get some of that feeling from those games. But there's having it on a separate day. It in the middle of the day, there's nothing else going on. I mean, you talked about how the finals should be a festival of the season in some ways. It should be a celebration. There should be reasons to be there. And it's just never has been. And I don't know if we're ever going to see, it doesn't feel like there's ever going to be a change on this front. You and I are big proponents that finals should happen at night.
Listen, this is solvable. I promise. It's simple. Wednesday to Saturday, Friday night semis, and then everybody who goes out and gets drunk on Friday night has all day to get ready to go and watch the games on Saturday night. Do you think that the teams who've been eliminated from the tournament and they're done, they have no more games, their games are done, that they're going to, get up for the 10 a.m. final on Sunday? They're not. They're just not. They're not going to do it. They are out until 3 a.m. They are hungover at 10 a.m. Okay, well, let's just say it like it is. So why are we doing this? Just move the tournament back one day. Most people are flying in early anyway. I saw plenty of players on my flight from New York to San Diego on Tuesday morning. Okay, people are coming out. They're taking this week off work. They're going to be there anyway. Let's just do Wednesday to Saturday. If teams want to leave on Saturday night, fine. But most people are going to say, you know what? I'll stay till Sunday. You can take a Sunday morning flight. You can take a Sunday afternoon flight. It's not that expensive. It's cheaper to fly early on Sundays than it is to fly on Sunday night. And a lot of teams stick around anyway until Monday or Tuesday. So I think it's really a very simple fix. You just need to move it one day back. And then you need to give everybody time to rest and recover, build up for the excitement of the Sunday game day. No one is excited about going to a 10 a.m. game, including spectators. Even people who do not drink alcohol are not excited for a 10 a.m. game. So it's really that simple, I think. And I just hope they make the change. I mean, I really, like, okay, some people are going to gripe and be like, I don't want to take the day off work. Okay, sorry. They're going to do it. It's nationals.
And you and I have talked about, what to do. You have the finals in the evening, and that means during the day you have time to, host a disc golf tournament or an all-star game or whatever. Give the Spirit Awards and the Poufall Awards out, and we'll present the Ulti World Awards. I don't know, like, do something, just anything. There's plenty of fun stuff to do, I think, between now and then for USA Ultimate. Host equity conversations, like host feedback conversations with me, your representatives. Like, I don't know. Well, you could do a million things with that time, but build something up so that there is excitement in the evening, the same way that we have for semifinals.
Pre-game press conferences.
Sure.
What are you looking for in this matchup? I mean, there's so much you can do with that. And there's just simply no time right now. And it's bad for teams too. Here's the other thing. Teams do not want to play an 8:30 p.m. game on Saturday night and then have to turn around and get ready for a Sunday, afternoon.
Brute Squad talked about it.
Yeah, they did.
And they said we didn't get a great night's rest, and we think that not to make excuses, but we think that impacted our play today.
You don't get home till 11:30 at night. You're all jacked up from the game. You got to wind down. You don't get that great a night of sleep. And then you try to go out and play in the middle of the day. I mean, it's already a weird schedule for Ultimate players because you're not used to doing this one game, then a bunch of hours, then another game. And, let's make it easier. And I really do think it is that simple. And I also think that way, 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 way more people are going to show up and go to the game if those finals are all together in the evening. Because people will plan to go to the game after spending their day, going to the beach or whatever they want to do. And then they can come out to the game. And then everybody goes out afterwards for the party. After the games. It just makes sense. It does make sense.
Let's talk a little bit about the women's final. Fury gets 15-9 win over Brute Squad. Brute Squad obviously a little discomfort, and it started right at the beginning of the game. I mean, they came out and threw a pass to a player standing on the line. I want to say it was Tulsa Douglas. So just a completely unforced error. And I mean, that set the tone for the rest of the game. That's how the rest of the game felt. It's funny because it actually reminded me of when Scandal upset Fury so many years ago in Texas, and that happened to Fury, which never happens to Fury. It's the same way with Brute Squad. That kind of random error where you throw it to someone standing out of bounds. I mean, it was more egregious when Fury did it. The person was 3 yards out of bounds, but it was still weird and unsettling. But that's the way that we saw Brute Squad play. And I'm going to take my victory lap here because I got plenty of L's to take from my predictions. So let me get my W's in where they are. But I told you that we could be seeing a Fury, like a 15-10 win. And they came out and outplayed Brute Squad from front to back. Really, this was the Brute Squad team that you were concerned about. This was the team that you were worried was in there. And there was kind of this, in the same way that we talked about Pony, and we're like, we know that they're talented, but we haven't seen it yet. And Pony showed up, and Brute Squad did not. This was the concern side of Brute Squad. to be fair, they kicked a lot of butt for most of the weekend. And I think there was a lot of thought like, oh, Brute Squad's back. We're getting another classic or whatnot. But this was an underwhelming performance. And I'm sure they are going to watch the tape and not feel good about it.
Well, I think we saw glimpses of this during the regular season. Here's the thing about Brute Squad. Their defense masks their offensive issues in many games. They overwhelm teams with their D-line, and they'll have their D-line on the field for 4, 5, 6 points in a row. There's no pressure on the O-line at that point. You're cruising. The other team is, trying stuff. They've got their D-line out to try to get a hold. You keep getting breaks. Offensively, we saw games during the season where they struggled. They struggled mightily against Molly Brown in the Pro Champs final. Remember that. And Fury, you got to give them credit, of course. Incredible defensive team, fantastic team. They get breaks on everybody. I think in the Phoenix Fury semi, Phoenix stayed in that game because their defense got breaks and kept them, from just completely collapsing. Now there was some great O-line play from Phoenix as well, but Fury's D-line gave everybody trouble. And when Brute Squad couldn't get their D-line on the field because their O-line wasn't getting holds, you saw them lose their trump card, basically. And so, Fury are just too good. They're just too good. I mean, we kind of knew it coming in and what we saw it play out.
Indeed. Fury once they got in front, once they got the front foot out, there was just they never let Brute Squad take control of the game. Brute Squad never had really any influence on the tenor of the game. It was really just playing Fury's game and Brute Squad was there.
Remarkable play from Claire Desmond. Anna Thompson, I thought, was fantastic in her first year with the team. Their veterans and their young players were contributing across the board. And really, it was the Phoenix game that was the aberration. They largely dominated everybody the entire weekend. They looked like they were on the path. Yeah. It was like a joke. Like they didn't even have to try. There are probably players on the O-line who didn't even play very much on Thursday. Then, they go up big on Phoenix. It was 7-4. And, Phoenix made it a game. So kudos to them for that. But really, this Fury team was inevitable.
I really wonder, and I think we actually have a question about this. I wonder about what would have happened had Phoenix gotten that upset. I'm seeing it. I feel like we had a question about who was the second best team here.
Oh, many people asked us, was Phoenix the second best team at Nationals, or was it Brute? How would you answer it, Keith?
It's tough because you think so much about those teams last game, and for Brute Squad it leaves a really sour taste in your mouth. But don't miss the rest of the tournament. I mean, Brute Squad beat Traffic 15-7. That's a team that Phoenix barely got by. I mean, Phoenix was very close to losing that Traffic game and flipping everything around. They win 12-11 in that game. So, the Fury result is really different, but Brute Squad thumped Wildfire, thumped Tabby, and beat Molly Brown really soundly in the semifinal.
Yep.
It was an incredibly impressive performance in the semifinal from Phoenix, and I think that performance was the higher high. You know what I mean? I think that
sure.
If you took each team's peak, Phoenix playing their best was probably better than Brute Squad playing their best. But as a whole resume, I think I got to take Brute Squad narrowly.
Well, here's a couple of points in that camp because I think I'm with you. Brute Squad beat Phoenix 15-12 at Pro Champs. Maybe you want to throw that out, but you can't just look at the single head-to-head against the best team at the tournament that won the tournament and say that, well, that proves it. Because, Brute Squad beat Molly 15-9, and Phoenix and Molly played to Universe in the third place game. Phoenix got the win. Phoenix had a lot of close games against common opponents with Brute Squad that they played very close, and Brute Squad won by 5 or 6. To some extent, I think that's matchups. To some extent, I think that's Phoenix really rising to the moment against Fury. But I think that if those teams play, I'd love to see it play out. But I think Brute Squad's still a 2.5 point favorite going into that game.
I might take Phoenix to cover that line, but I agree that I think I have Brute Squad as second best team in the tournament.
I think based on the head-to-head results and most of the evidence besides the final from Brute, which they really just did not play well, I think you have to say that Brute's the better team. Even though I will say Phoenix is going to get one. Phoenix is going to win a title in the next 5 years. In fact, let's go to a question.
I was just about to say, we got a question for this.
Which happens first? Phoenix gets their first title or Ring gets their second? There's a question from Edward. What do you think, Keith?
Oof. I think Ring gets a second. You know, both teams have really young cores. I think they're going to I don't see a lot of reason for their cores to come apart. Maybe if they lose Jack and Ryan Oscar, like that's too big a hit, but the talent pipeline is pretty rich for both sides. So I think that the signs point up for both teams. It's more about environment. I just think Ring's going to be in a better position. I mean, it makes sense. Like they are the reigning champs and Phoenix is the third place team, and the teams in front of Phoenix, they look really good. It's just been so hard for teams to break through, and Fury's such a staunch opponent. I think I gotta take Ring.
I'm gonna take Phoenix. We have not seen a men's team win back-to-back championships since 2011.
Sure,
Revolver run twice in a row, and it's look at Sockeye. Look at how good Sockeye was, and we'll talk more about them in a little bit. They were fantastic this whole season, and a couple injuries. They didn't ever look right at nationals, and they got smoked in semis.
I mean, that sure
kind of like Pony. We don't in 2019.
We don't see a lot of back-to-back champions in the men's division, but when's the last time you saw somebody besides Brute Squad or Fury win in the women's division?
It's a fair point. I just think the young talent on Phoenix is the most promising in the division. I mean, I think that in some ways it's like who's going to win first, Sixers or Phoenix. We don't forget about Sixers. They didn't play this year, but they soundly beat Traffic in Canadian championships, and Traffic was like pretty clearly the fifth best team at this tournament. So I think it's pretty interesting. I just think Phoenix's best players are like all under the age of 24. And that is a pipeline towards success. Fury has a lot of players who are over 30, who are like major contributors. And eventually those people retire or they lose a step. It's coming. Now, are they going to disappear? Of course not. This is Fury. They just added Dina Elamelik and Anna Thompson this year. Like, I don't really think they're going to have the well run dry. But I also think that Phoenix showed you in that game that they have the tools to win against a team as good as Fury, and it's coming.
I love it. I would love for Phoenix to crack it open and be right there. And along with Sixers, I mean, it could really change the women's division in a great way.
I have one more question, and maybe I'll answer this one first. Before we take a quick break, let's focus as we continue to focus on the champs here. This is from Matt. What commonalities did the three champions have besides a lot of talent? I think I have a simple answer, and I think you could talk your way through any number of things here. My answer is going to be very strong handler play. Mm-hmm. When you look at BFG led by Mario O'Brien, breakout player of the year Locke, Cheryl Sue, and the rest of their offensive backfield, that was what kept them getting holds and winning games. And you can say the exact same thing about these other teams. Ring moving Gooch and Saul Yannick to the O-line after the success that they had during the Raleigh Flyers season worked impeccably in the final. No turnovers between those two throwing to each other in the final. And Fury, I think, is a more sort of generally balanced team. But I still think the strength is the throwing and delivery from the handler set. I was incredibly impressed by all three teams as handlers. And, the game more than ever is about possession. We are not in the era of Hostak and deep shots. We are in the grindy under, dominator, hold the disc, don't take chances, offensive world. And, it varies from game to game and to some extent from division to division. But that has been the predominant mode of winning at both the college and club level now for 3 or 4 years. I guess I'd say 3. 2019 is when I really feel like we saw that taking over. And, it was very prevalent this year. So that's my answer. Keith, what about you?
I'm trying to think of things that the champions had in common that the teams that didn't win don't necessarily have, so that we can try and find that differentiating, championship factor. And I think handlers, or even just throwers, is a great one. I also think that none of those teams felt over-reliant on a couple of players, and that ability allowed them to, weather tough positions, to play through deep into the bracket. I also think that all of those teams are teams that I feel like have good spacing and timing offensively. You don't see a lot of clogging. When I think of BFG, I think of all that space that they create in the handler space for them to work that kind of break side reset system that Mario O'Brien was piloting so well. When I think of Fury, you think of, to me, their offensive spacing. You think of their ability to create lots of room downfield for big gainers and make it really difficult to challenge them in the reset space. And certainly Ring of Fire, they're spacing a bit different than other teams because of how much they like to use that upline cutting system. But these were teams that had clear plans and, great execution. And a lot of that, I think, came down to the way that they created space offensively.
All right, well, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, talk a bit more about BFG and the mixed final, and we've got a bunch more of your questions. Stick around. You're listening to Deep Look. Welcome back to Deep Look. So in the mixed final, Seattle BFG beats Michigan Hybrid 14-10. It makes it feel like it wasn't a close game, but it was a close game most of the way. Late break in the first half gave BFG the halftime lead, and then they ended up pulling away in the second half. And BFG really did look like the best team throughout the tournament. And I think one of the things that came to mind for me is, like you said earlier, Keith, only 9% of people picking BFG in the Beat Charlie Challenge, should they have been seen as kind of a surprise winner, an underdog of sorts. I mean, ultimately, Keith, they were the 2 seed at the tournament. They beat Mixtape both of the last times they played them. And, otherwise had only lost to Shame on the season and back at the Pro Championships in the second round. I feel like we sort of just saw this team as an also-ran to Mixtape, but the evidence was actually there that they were the better team out of Seattle, and they beat them, and then they beat them again, and then they beat them again at Nationals. 3 wins in the postseason against this Mixtape team. So, should they have been seen as a true title contender, not just in the sense that they could win, but maybe that they should win? I mean, because Shame is a 1 seed. I mean, I don't think a lot of people expected them to be the true favorite to win.
With the way that seeding shook out, when you look at those top 6 seeds, Shame, BFG, Dragon Thrust, Amp, Space Heater, and Mixtape, I feel like in a lot of people's perception, BFG was probably the least likely to win a title of those 3. I'll check. Let me check the picks just in case to get a better sense of it. So Mixtape in first, Space Heater in second, Shame in third, BFG in fourth, Amp and Dragon in fifth and sixth. Okay. So, that's not too far off from, it's pretty balanced after you get past that top 3. Everybody was expecting what I had been expecting all year, and I'll take my L for that. Space Heater and Mixtape couldn't have been more wrong about Space Heater. almost literally, if they had not showed up to the tournament, maybe I would have been more wrong. But man, not a great weekend for Space
They finished
Heater.
15th, Keith.
Unreal.
15th.
How's that possible?
That's crazy.
It doesn't make any sense to me. I can't wait for the Space Heater analysis article because someone's got to break it down for me what the heck happened. But instead, we get this BFG team who plays really, really well, a really balanced style. I think that a lot of the credit's going to go to that backfield because their handlers really drove play. Mario O'Brien and Tommy Lee and Cheryl Sue in particular, all the Cheryl Sue hype is well deserved. She was awesome. Mario O'Brien still doing the same things that I feel like he's been doing for 10 years. And I don't know why it was so effective this year. And it has always been, but I mean, he was just driving the bus, and that's sometimes what it looked like. Like they were just walking it down the street. Very effective. They play against a really exciting and athletic hybrid team. And despite not being a team I feel like is, imposing defensive squad, they kept that hybrid deep game from really getting the Michigan team off the ground and letting the upstarts in the game. And their offense can be so methodical that if they get the disc back from you, they can just walk it the other way. So BFG, I think, very clearly the best team at the tournament.
Hybrid lost to AMP earlier in the tournament, but here's the thing about the Hybrid resume. Okay, they're good. They were really good. I think this speaks well to the Great Lakes mixed division and what that region, maybe could have been. If they'd had more teams at nationals in a normal season, which they probably would have had 2, possibly 3 teams at nationals, I think those teams could have done well. But here's the record here for Hybrid. They get a 3-point win over Dragon Thrust. Very good win. I think their best win of the tournament. Then they lose to AMP. They beat Exist by 1. A game that had they lost, had Universe gone the other way, they would have been knocked out and not made the bracket. Think about that.
That's wild.
It's even more wild now that you know that they made it all the way to the final.
Yeah.
So they would have lost on point diff had they lost that Exist game, which is just crazy. Then they beat Lawless by 1, and that must have been quarters, right? Yeah, because they ended up winning the pool.
Yeah, that was in quarters.
They beat Noise by 2, and they lose by 4 to BFG. Good team. That's an easy path. I'm sorry. It's an easy path. They get Lawless and Noise in quarters and semis. And not to knock them. I think they were what I thought they could be, which is a really good team that hadn't played anybody, so we didn't know exactly how good they were going to be. But they were super legit. Connor Lucas was really good. Nathan Champeau was really good. Sarah Nitz was a very impressive defender. I think this was a great team, but I was very confident that BFG was going to win the final. They kept it interesting for a while, but I think eventually BFG able to just apply enough pressure late to end up winning pretty comfortably.
The talk after pool play was about the other side of the bracket, where the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 seeds all resided. And on the other side, you have Hybrid and Noise winning their pools and advancing to pre-quarters, and Space Heater looking like the top challenger in that side of the bracket, and they don't even get out of pre-quarters, and don't even get close. They lost 15-10 to Lawless. Really, just a truly shocking result. I was feeling great. I was feeling great, Charlie, because I told you on the podcast, on our live show, I said, my gut just tells me something's wrong with Shane. Turned out to be right. I also made a very bold call for Sprocket to reach semifinals. And when I looked at this bracket and I saw the 14 seed, the 12 seed, the 9 seed, the 7 seed, all with Sprocket, and they didn't have to go through Space Heater to get to semis, I was licking my lips. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to nail this Sprocket to semifinals pick. I'm going to look like a genius. Did not work out that way. Noise executed that plan. So credit to Noise and Hybrid. I've already been chirped at by both. Totally deserved. I agree with you. The path for Hybrid was soft. That I agree with. But you know what? They fought their way to get there.
They did.
They beat that. They win that Dragon Thrust game.
That's a really good team.
They're able to survive against AMP on point diff. They took the loss to AMP in that head-to-head 13-11, but they're able to keep it close enough to be available on point diff. It's still overall not the most impressive resume for a finalist, but I'd say that the tape speaks highly of that.
I agree with that.
I had, I think, lower expectations than you did coming into the tournament and probably came away with a better impression, maybe because of that delta between what I expected. But, I thought that we've seen this story before. A team plays in a bubble, they play in a region, we overestimate the ability of the region as a whole, and it's regional level teams who are on Twitter saying they're nationals level teams now, even though they didn't come. And hybrid shows up and they look a little outclassed, especially for a team that hasn't been there before. But I was really impressed with the poise, of players like the ones that you mentioned. Connor Lucas stood out. They could have really been shaken when James Highsmith, who's one of the most experienced, most important leaders for this team, goes down on day one.
Yeah.
That could really shake a team like this, right?
Sure.
And for them to bounce back from that and continue to play really well, very, very, very impressive from this hybrid team. And, I deserve all the hybrid chirping that I get.
Yeah. I mean, they did what they needed to do, and that's what it's all about at nationals. And look,
I really do not have my finger on the pulse of the mixed division.
Oh man, I mean, we both had Space Heater mixtape in finals.
I mean, I took some shots. Look, people were. I said Sean might go 0-3. They did go 0-3. So who knows? You take enough shots, like some are going to land, some don't. But it was a really interesting tournament. We had some teams with really high variance. Teams like Lawless that had some crazy games, crazy comebacks, and then they beat Space Heater like that. Like, that's a team with a really high variance performance. And I think that added some real spice to the tournament.
How about Shame just melting against Dragon? That was wild. They were 12-6, and they lost 14-13 on Universe.
It's a real shame.
Including an epic Caleb Denacor Callahan off the centering pass. It's never good when you're bleeding breaks, and then you give up a Callahan off the centering pass.
You don't say.
That's when you know that, like, we might lose. And they did. It was just a very unpredictable year. I mean, you had Ring in the final, so I give you credit for that, but we both picked Sockeye. What happened to Sockeye, Keith?
This is not going to be probably the most satisfactory explanation, but they ran into a team playing really, really well, and they were too hurt to really do anything about it. I mean, they looked totally overwhelmed by Pony, and missing some of their key players kept them, I think, from being able to grab onto something and fight back. So, I mean, it's a shocking way for their season to end, given the strength of their rest of their performances.
It goes to show you that, like, having your team healthy and ready to play, like, is such an important part of it. And it honestly, you could probably say it in this case, they probably peaked a little too early. They played their best ultimate earlier in the season and not at nationals. They were never really quite right. They never looked super convincing. Still an incredibly talented team, don't get me wrong, but it didn't ever feel like they were going to win that game going into it, and it became very clear very quickly that they were not.
We talked about, is this a team that is going to be able to turn it on? Because a lot of the projecting about them was seeing how dominant they were in the regular season and kind of assuming, given that they were the reigning champs, that they would be able to push beyond that at the club championships, that they would be able to add to that on their way to a peak. But it just never felt like the switch got flipped. And
I think you also got to give credit to Pony, who played
absolutely
tremendous. I mean, this is as good as Pony's looked since they won in 2018. And it's not even really that close. Like, they were never the same team in 2019 ever at any point, and they got embarrassed in semis. They delivered the embarrassment this time, but that was after a regular season where they didn't look very good. And, I mean, I don't even know where you want to give the credit. Their defense was so much better this year than it was at any point in 2019. Like, they went back to rock solid matchup defense fundamentals, and were just blowing people up. I mean, Jabron Meeser blowing up unders with crazy layout Ds. Grant Lindsley playing incredible defense. Conrad Schloer back. I mean, everything looked good from their D-line. It makes it that much more impressive that Ring was able to win that final, only giving up a single break, and looking as poised as they did, because that is not the Ring of past. So you got to give credit to Pony, but I do think that Sockeye being hurt, I mean, they do rely a lot on their top guys to produce their offense. And when they didn't have their, Ben Snell out there on the D-line to kind of drive things over there, and a handful of other guys out, everything got shifted weird. They had to switch their rotations, and it made them ineffective. And with Pony playing at a really high level, I mean, we also watched Simon Montague have a horrible game. He had a horrible game. And you can't go out there and throw 0 goals, 0 assists, and 6 turns from your center handler and expect to win. You're just never going to win like that.
No, you sure cannot. And meanwhile, I think some of the players that we had concerns about from Pony during the regular season really showed up. I mean, Jimmy was a force. There were times when he looked like the Jimmy of old, just going into takeover mode. Chris Kotcher, I'd been pretty hard on him on the podcast. He came through very well. Ben Yacht was torching, especially any weaker competition that he saw. He's merciless out there.
Sam Little back on the O-line. Credit to the coaching staff.
Sam Little played
so good,
really well. I thought Harper Garvey did his job. And John Randolph was in a lot of ways, I think, one of the breakouts of the tournament. So Pony looked fearsome,
and it makes.
But shout out to one of my favorite players to watch from Pony was Shawshank Alati.
Yeah,
I know that Jibbs is going to get all the credit, Jabron Meeser, because of his explosive style of play. But I was having a lot of fun watching Shank both before and after the turn. Kind of do the yeoman's work. There's always somebody on Pony doing that job, and I felt like that was really Shank this at this tournament.
All right, here's a question from JM. Whatever rift there is between Pony and Empire pretty clearly cost them at least a club title and likely an AUDL title. Will we start to see more cities shifting to what Raleigh does and have cooperation between both entities? There were a number of sort of questions along this same theme. Somebody asking, how much credence do you give to the Pony loss because of conflicts with Empire narrative? Keith, what are your thoughts on this?
It's an opportunity cost issue. I think that I don't know the details of the relationship between Pony and Empire.
Let me give a very broad overview of the basics.
Give the info that you have.
People understand kind of the situation. Empire tends to, for its top players, pay for more things, give them more money, and expect more in return, like them showing up to all practices and games. Pony also this year, feeling that they did not do enough to enforce attendance in 2019, and that being one of the reasons that they underperformed, demanded that players show up. Maybe demand is the wrong term. Expected that players would show up to practices and tournaments. And so obviously those things come into conflict in some ways, and you have to find a way through those. And there were naturally conflicts there. And so some players were able to deal with that and work through that and, play Empire games, but then also maybe fly out and play the next day at, a tournament with Pony. Because there were a number of players who played on both teams. So your Marquez Brownlee, Ben Yacht, Ben Katz. But there were also a lot of players who maybe were going to play Empire or had played Empire in the past that didn't this year, and vice versa. So that's the basic overview. Commitment expected from both entities and scheduling conflicts that I think were exacerbated by the late start and, due to COVID. And so there were players who were not able to make both work or chose not to make both work.
Right. There may be some players who don't want to, and that I think is something people don't think about. Like, it's not like everybody on Pony wants to be on Empire necessarily. And for Ring and for the Flyers, where that crossover is pretty much team wide, you can basically use the Flyer season as an extension of the Ring season, and that might not be an option for Pony. If Jimmy Mickle and Chris Kotcher and Harper Garvey don't want to play for the Empire, then how much good does it do you to treat the Empire like an extension of the Pony season? Because you're going to want reps with those players in order to integrate them into your team. And, you can say all you want about if Jack Williams and Ryan Osgar had been on Empire, or been on Pony, things would have been differently, but it's not necessarily their fault to plan for the potential for those guys to play for the team that they're going to match up with in the final. That's the the cost benefit doesn't make sense in that for me. So it works for the Flyers. I do think that other teams may see it work that way. And I think the Flyers may be showing an example of the fact that the level of play in the AUDL can be high enough to feel like it's proper preparation for the club season, that you can use some of the things you pick up in the AUDL season in the club season. I talked to Mike DeNardis about it, and he talked about the things that they had learned and modified during the AUDL season that they felt like they could apply in club, and that those things may be more similar than different, when before it may have not felt like they were quite applicable to one another. So showing teams that exists, may present options for some clubs, for some cities, but there are also cities where you're just not going to get enough buy-in from people who want to participate in AUDL. And that's going to be a problem if you're going to try and meld their seasons together.
I mean, it's a fascinating situation. You think about the teams that, had a lot of crossover. Machine and Union also had a lot of crossover. Not 100%, right? Joe White didn't play Union. Ring had guys that didn't play on the Flyers. Dylan Lanier, Liam Searles-Bowes. Obviously, the players who they imported from the Empire in Williams and Oscar. John Nethercutt coming from San Diego. But, was Jack Williams ever going to play with Pony? I think he was going to play Ring regardless. That's his team.
He said Ring for life after the game.
That's what I'm saying. And so I don't know that they weren't getting him regardless of what they did. So I do think it hurts at the margin. It does hurt both Pony and Empire not to find more cooperation there. But whose responsibility is it to figure that out? It's not unreasonable for the Empire to say, hey, we're paying you a bunch of money to compete on our team. We expect you to be at the games. That's a reasonable stance. I think it's equally reasonable for Pony captains to say, hey, we need you to show up to practice and come to tournaments. We only have 3 tournaments a season. If you miss them, we don't get these valuable reps. And they think it hurt them in 2019. And it probably did. So the thing is, you got to have some good faith discussion. I also think the AUDL needs to think about its scheduling more carefully for teams that are dealing with this. Now, this was an odd year, but in 2022, if you're starting in April, May, like usual, don't schedule the teams that are going to be going to the U.S. Open on the U.S. Open weekend. Right? Make it possible for people to do both because it benefits the AUDL teams too. Think about what happened this year. Chain went to the U.S. Open, basically completely gutting the Atlanta Hustle roster. They lost a shocker game to Tampa that cost them home field advantage in the playoffs, and then they lost by the narrowest of margins to the Empire in New York in the first round. What could have been different had they been at that game and not had everybody out for U.S. Open? So, that was cooperation, right? But the cooperation was basically the entire roster gets to go and play at U.S. Open with Chain. So, are you going to are AUDL teams going to let the club teams just get the front seat and say, we're basically throwing away this game? I mean, I think probably the Hustle thought they could win without those guys, but Tampa said no thanks.
Well, it also helps. I mean, Ring is run by the same person as the person who runs the Flyers. Right. That's not the case for every other team. Ring can basically have the same system as the Flyers because they're coached by the same people. They're led by the same people. So, that kind of synergy isn't free and available for every other AUDL/club team out there. It's just not how it works. It also was a weird year. If this was a traditional club season, would Ring have been able to not play in the entire regular season? No. So, being able to do that, it opened up opportunities for them to kind of have this Flyers Plus season. And that, again, is not something that's necessarily available every year.
I'm not sure how long this is going to be tenable for teams to have it both ways. Can you really do both in a normal year? I think you can if you think a lot about the scheduling and that teams are able to kind of pick their scheduling to make that work. But it's tough.
I wonder if teams in the PUL are kind of seeing this and thinking, oh, well, look at the success that these, we've seen the same thing in Phoenix, right? A lot of the Phoenix roster is on Radiance. Like, could that be benefiting them? Like, can we replicate this? So it's not just the AUDL teams. There are going to be teams looking to figure out, how can we create a bridge between our semi-pro scene and our club scene, and how can that benefit both parties?
If 7 Ring players are eligible to play for UNC Darkside at December College Nationals, should any men's teams even show up?
This has not been untrue previously, right? I mean, I imagine that, your pits, hey, Colorado basically had the whole team at the club championships too. Like, they're not going to be intimidated, I don't think, of that team. And so, hey, some of those Ring guys are going to be on Carlton, I'm pretty sure. So I wouldn't just like give up or anything. It might be more imposing in the women's division. What if seven Phoenix players show up to play for UNC? That's like a very real thing that could be happening. I might be able to count them off in my head right now. Should any team show up for the women's division? That, to me, is maybe a more pressing question than Ring in the college men's.
I think UNC is the favorite in both divisions this winter, but I don't think that means they're necessarily going to win.
How many BYU players were on Killjoys? So
I don't know the answer to that.
Although BYU did not go to conferences, so
nope.
I guess it's not really a factor.
And I can understand that.
Yeah. Here's one that's since we're talking all this Raleigh's talk. Now that Raleigh is arguably the best city for Ultimate, well, that's kind of a hot take. It's a hot take. Will they become as obnoxious as Seattle has been for all of these years? Yeah, I don't see why not. The parallels are very strong. Part of it, to me, will depend on what happens with the youth scene. Like, do the U20 teams become like half Raleigh, and I guess you can't do half Raleigh and half Seattle. Like a third Raleigh, a third Seattle, a third everywhere else. Like, is that where we're headed?
I mean, from a talent perspective,
I think that would really upset a lot of people. Yeah,
look, no, I don't think it will be as obnoxious as Seattle, because I think that there's like sort of an ethos thing. Seattle does have a bit of a holier than thou attitude towards a lot of Ultimate things, sometimes deserved, sometimes not deserved. And I just don't think you really get, I don't get that vibe from Raleigh. Raleigh's like the blue collar,
the gold medals pile
the
up.
blue collar champions. They're like defense first, grinders, and maybe that's going to go by the wayside. It could. Certainly the pipeline is there for them to be, as good, if they're not already as good as the Seattle, youth scene. But I do think that I generally don't get the same sort of, superior attitude from folks in Raleigh, at least right now.
If they keep winning, they'll be the villains. I mean, Pony quickly became a villain.
That's how it goes, isn't it?
It does not take a lot of time for the community to decide that they're rooting against you. It's just the nature of sports.
Would you rather wanted to watch Ring Machine or Ring Sockeye? If those matchups could have happened.
Ring Sockeye. I mean, Sockeye didn't have a great tournament, but Machine, like, what were they? One of the worst teams in the tournament?
I mean, I think that's a little strong.
That's fair.
I mean, they still made it to quarters and then lost to Pony.
Respectably.
I mean, I think the what's embarrassing is that they lost 15-6 to Truck Stop. 15-6.
15-9 to Condors was also pretty embarrassing at the time.
I agree with that. But they then beat Truck Stop in Consolation, which, you can make of that what you want. But no, it was not a good weekend for for Machine, excuse me. They losing Walden Nelson really hurt. I think both from a leadership standpoint and from a, defensive glue standpoint. I think that they didn't get great performances from some of their key offensive players. I don't think Pavel had a great weekend, and Joe White was at times just absolutely terrible. And you can't have your best players playing really bad. And it seems like one of those things where just everything went wrong, and it's kind of crazy they beat Revolver given how they played on Thursday.
I'm still in the Sockeye camp here.
I think so, especially a full strength Ring Sockeye game would have been really fun. Like, here's a question. If Sockeye had been at full strength, would they have beat Pony?
It's hard for me to look at 15-8 and to watch that game and think yes, but I definitely think they would have had a much better shot. Trent Dillon's a pretty big loss.
It was tough. Too many injuries. It's hard to know what a team is going to look like when, everything gets shifted, right? You have to move somebody else to the O-line, and then that messes up your D-line, and then you lose somebody else who's really important to your D-line offense. Things go wrong quick when your rotations get mucked up like that. All right, we got some more sort of like scattered questions here. How about this one? Let's do this. Let's do the consolation rundown. Someone asked us to go through consolation play and talk about what happened, who finished towards the top, etc. Quickly, third place games. Your champs were Mixtape, Sockeye, and Phoenix. Phoenix getting a universe win.
These games have world's implications.
That's right. All three of those champs are likely to be able to compete at the World Club Championships. They haven't finished up giving out the bids, but generally, eventually, the USA is going to get at least 3 bids in each division. So those wins could be meaningful in that sense. Let's see. How do we want to do this? Should we just go division by division?
Pick a division.
Okay, let's go through mixed. Mixtape beat Noise in the third place game. Fifth place finisher was Dragon Thrust. They beat Sprocket, who finished 6th. Then you have Amp and Love Tractor rounding out the top 8. Love Tractor, what a rally by them to, get to nationals in the first place, and then look really competitive. They go 2-1 in pool play. And, I think losing to Sprocket's probably a bit of a disappointment for them in that pre-quarter game. But then they go through and they win out through all the way into the 7th place game when they lose to a close game to Amp. So 9th place, Slow. 10th, Lawless. 11th, Locksaw. Shine in 12th. Polar Bears in 13th. Shame in 14th. And then Space Heater all the way down in 15th place and Exist in 16th. I told you, Keith, Exist.
The one seed in 14th, is that what he said? And the 6th seed in 15th.
Yeah.
Like that's
two
weird,
title contenders.
Really very strange. Very strange weekend. Hey, Love Tractor. I took them in the game. They did well for me. Although they got to be a little weirded out. They went to nationals and they played Shine and Lawless twice each. How many times do you think you played 2 teams twice at nationals? That's weird.
It is a little weird. Of course, this year's we still don't really know what it's going to mean to finish top 8. Normally, that means you're in the pro flight. This year, they said that being in the pro flight, like this year, wouldn't have an effect on the pro flight. But how are they not about to let teams like Hybrid go to elite tournaments next year? That seems nonsensical. They're gonna find a way.
I just think they're going. I mean, I said this before, but I think that it's not like they've had their doors beaten down on people trying to enter into elite events recently. They've often had to go to the wait list. So I would not be surprised if they, have expanded fields or less stringency on tournament requirements. I think teams have been asking for that for a long time anyway, and that opens up the door for some of these teams to get invites.
What do you make of Space Heater finishing 15th? I mean, obviously they're better than that. Or are they not? It feels like a situation to me where the team that has title aspirations, they lose and they're like, who cares? And I don't think every team does that, but I think some teams do that.
I think that when you're in the consolation losses, but I still don't understand what happened, how they lost to Lawless 15-10. That's the part that really throws me. I mean, they beat Sprocket 15-7. Like, Sprocket's good. And then they turn around, they lose to Mixtape, a close game, 15-12. It's not a barn burner, but not a beatdown either. And then they just get thumped by Lawless.
I don't know, man.
That is the unexplainable one to me. They lost their next 2 consolation games on by a single goal each. So maybe they really were trying. I don't know what happened to them though. It's a truly a mystery.
It's the kind of nationals that can cause you not to come back next year. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but would you be shocked?
Yeah, is this a great recruiting attempt for, they get all these other players to come and join them, maybe for a season. I don't know.
Scandal back.
Played. Yeah, it's good. It might be pretty appealing to go play Scandal next year after this. Let's leave a end on a sour note.
All right, women's division, third place, Phoenix over Mali on Universe. Great win for them to close out their tournament. They'll likely be at Worlds, maybe both teams, in fact. Traffic beats Riot in the fifth place game. Nemesis gets the seventh spot. Schwa losing 13-11 in that game. Those are the last two teams that make it into the typical pro flight, top 8. Ninth place, Parcha loses to Tabby Rosa 7-6. So really good tournament for Tabby Rosa, coming in seeded 15th. Really for both teams. They play in the ninth place game, coming in as the 15th and 16th seeded teams. 11th place, Nightlock over Pop. 13th place, Rival beats Siege. 15th place, Wildfire beats last place finisher Bent. Tough weekend for Bent, playing without Yina Cartagena, and they go winless.
Very, very difficult for them, and it really changed the texture of Pool A, in my opinion, which ended up not doing that well, I guess, in the end, because Pop and Rival also finished below the top 10. So I think the 12th was the highest a team from Pool A outside of Fury finished. Welcome to the benefits of our current bracket system. Schwa bounced back. I was very disappointed. I had them in the game. They go 0-3. I'm thinking without Mariel Hammond, there's still enough talent. We saw what they could do last year, and they really laid an egg. I don't know how their best game in pool play was against Molly Brown, but they just were not at the level. But impressive of them to bounce back in Consolation when they could have been in the same situation as Space Heater, a team that had really high aspirations, disappoints out the gate, and then just phones it in the rest of the way, and they opted not to do that.
Tabby Rosa went 2-1 in pool play. They beat Riot. Fun result for them. They beat Siege in pre-quarters. And, they lose handily to Phoenix. It's kind of like maybe the worst possible matchup for them. Which is a team that knows them really well.
Super crazy to me. I said the same thing to them, and they said that they loved that matchup. They were happy with that matchup. Even after the game, I believe their coach told one of our reporters, that was the best matchup for them. To me, that doesn't make any sense. I think that when you're a team like them, that you're looking to surprise teams, and you're not going to surprise Phoenix. They had the book on you already.
Well, they then rooted for Phoenix in the stands during semis.
Of course. They have some former Phoenix players on the team.
Regional love.
Yeah.
But yeah, really, it's just a great weekend for them overall. And I have to say, I think Riot had a good weekend. To come finish 6th. Obviously, this is not the Riot of past, but they, looked like they may not even field a team, and they have all these new players, and they come out and they get some good wins. They didn't really compete with the top teams, but I think finishing 6th at Nationals, given all of the turnover that they had, is pretty solid. Shows you the depth that
I'll be
Seattle
very
has.
curious what the future of Riot looks like.
I agree.
How many players want to return? How many of these players want to stay around? And what does that do for them next season? Because if you really look at it as a rebuilding year, A, finishing 6th is really good for a team that's rebuilding. But B, that lays a great foundation for the future.
Men's division, third place finisher is Sakai, so they bounced back and they beat Rhino in the third place game. Fifth place, Machine gets the 9-4 win over Truck. I don't know what was going on there. Strange scoreline. But Machine ends up finishing 5th. Truck stop in 6th. Dig gets the 7th place finish. They beat Temper in the 7-8 game. 9th place, Johnny Bravo over Chain Lightning. Chain Lightning in 10th. Ooh, tough weekend. Condors.
What happened there?
Yeah, let's come back to
very popular semifinals pick among the staff.
Let's come back to Chain in just a second. 11th place, Condors beating Sprout 13-10. Revolver over Sub-Zero in the 13th place game. It's crazy what happens in Consolation. And then Killjoys beat Lotus in the 15th place game. So Lotus finishes last. Not that I'm super surprised by that, but I think it's
The two young teams going toe to toe, not to finish last, and Killjoys gets the better of the college boys.
I just really truly think there's different motivations when teams get to Consolation. You've got teams like Temper and Dig that know they have no chance to win the tournament, and they play hard, and they end up finishing in 7th and 8th place. And you have a team like Chain that is thinking about trying to win a championship. You know, they go 2-1 in pool play. They win their pre-quarter, and then they lose to Ring and Quarters, and then just collapse and lose to Truck, Temper, and Bravo. And, like, not super close either. I have no idea what happened in those games. Those games we don't have reporters on those games. I just think that expectations play a large role in focus on consolation play. Lower seeded teams want to break seed. Lower seeded teams know they're going to end up there and want to play hard. Higher seeded teams that think they have a chance to win a championship and then, you know, lose a heartbreaker typically either put their bench out on the field or just don't really try that hard. And I mean, it's part of the reason I don't really love the current system for, you know, picking flights based on consolation play. I don't really know what a better solution would be, but I think that's why you see these sort of disparate results. You know, I think in a neutral game, do I think that, you know, Temper is beating Chain? No.
I think that the intent is to create a motivation that makes consolation like feel a little more valuable, but it's obviously not working.
I mean, I think you could argue that teams should just play harder and like not give up just because it's consolation play time.
Temper quietly, I think, had a good weekend for the record.
Let's look at their results. Take us through them.
Well, so they take L's all the way through pool play and losing to Lotus. Obviously, that's the rough one. But they gave Sockeye a decent game, 15-11. They gave Rhino a good game, 13-11. And then, you know, in consolation, they beat Sub, they beat Revolver. Tell you one with Sprout, that's weird to me too. That's kind of like losing to Lotus. So I don't know what's up with that, but you know, beat Chain and then losing to Dig. So up and down weekend.
I don't know if you can call it
maybe I was a little too charitable
pool play. Like that's what I'm talking about, right? A team that goes 0-3 in pool play, it's like, well, we got to get our head straight and play hard in consolation. Whereas a team that loses in quarters might just be like, let's get to the bar.
What happened in Pool D? Like, what did Pony do to everybody? Because Sub and Chain just bombed out. I
mean, Sub going 0-3 was one of the like shockers of the day, right? I mean, not only did they lose to Pony 15-12. Okay, I mean, makes a lot of sense. Then they lose to Killjoys 15-8. 15-8. I mean, Killjoys is a solid team, but they were one of the worst teams at the tournament.
They finished second to last.
And then they lose to Chain 15-6. Like, they just completely imploded. Everything went wrong. They only win one game over Lotus the whole weekend. Disaster. I don't know. I think they were overinflated by the regular season, which I kind of said before, but not like this.
The results of some of the oddities in the results of this national championship is just like, I don't know. I still don't know what to do with them, especially in mixed and men's. I mean, there are just some really wacky results, whether it's Machine and Truck or it's Sub and the Killjoys. Just really baffling outcomes.
All right, one or two more questions, and then we're going to take it over to the Sub bonus, where we're going to talk about production, how kind of some Ulti-World behind the scenes, how things have changed since Keith and I first covered a national championships event. It was college nationals and
Charlie's burying the lead here. We're going to talk about ESPN because a lot of people had a lot of things to say.
We are going to talk about ESPN. I covered 2012 club nationals. You weren't at Ulti-World yet at that point, Keith.
I was with Skyd, I believe, at that time.
That's right. But things have changed quite a bit, so we'll talk about that, and we will talk about ESPN. So you can become a subscriber and help finish out our subscriber drive strong. We have reached our goal of 400 new subscribers, so thank you so much if you're one of those folks, or if you're a subscriber from years past. And we're trying to get to 500. We've got some fun stretch goal giveaways if we get to that point. So if you haven't subscribed, now is the time, and we will reward you with the subscriber bonus here every week on Deep Look. So a couple more questions. Keith, grab one.
All right. Daniel asks, what's the best or worst way to spend the huge Nationals winnings, which maybe is sarcastic. Or maybe Daniel was betting on the side.
These teams get a giant check for $2,000 when they win the championship. Okay.
A huge check in size, not in value.
I'm fairly sure. In fact, I am positive that does not even cover the entry fees for the entire team and its players. Okay.
Whoops.
It doesn't even cover the entry fee. I don't even understand the point. Like, it's one thing if you want to give them $2,000. Why are they getting a huge check for $2,000?
Photo op.
That's not even but it's a terrible photo op. I think if you win Nationals, you should win at least $10,000, maybe $20,000. Find a sponsor to give away this money. I mean, in disc golf this year, the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship, the total prize purse was $250,000, and the winners each got $30,000. Now, if you're going to give away $30,000, you can put it on a big check. If you're going to give away $2,000, you need to do that behind closed doors at ACH direct deposit, because nobody.
You can Venmo me. You can Venmo me that much money.
Literally, you can Venmo that much money. You can literally Venmo it. Okay, like you can go to the ATM and get 20s and hand over cash, and it's like not even that much. Like you can walk around with that much money in your pocket. They just gave
a briefcase of cash.
I mean, it's like the same thing as this giant check. Anyway, the best way to spend $2,000 is definitely to go to the bar and like have a blowout party and like, you know, get bottle service and get food. And, you know, you should be able to hold up one of those receipts at the end of the night with all the stuff on it. Like you see
the best way is to take like $400 of it and do that and take the rest and use some of it to subscribe to Ultiworld to get our best bets column, and then bet all the rest on DraftKings, on AUDL, on Charlie's picks, and walk away with 7 times as much money. And then you actually feel like you won something.
But come on, man, $2,000? Come on, man.
It's like not enough money to be really exciting, but a little enough money to feel like a little weird and insulting. So.
Okay. Let's see here. Someone asked, how are the logistics at the main fields? We heard about Gate, but how did Ultiworld fare in the tents and on the scaffolds? So I don't actually really know what Gate was. I think
it's just an attempted meme at when you closed the gate with a USAU person. I don't know.
Is it?
That was what the original Gate tweet, I believe, was.
Oh, I don't even know. So I closed a gate on somebody?
Yeah, but like it looked like you had driven some stuff back there. Maybe it was like media equipment or something. I don't know. And then you and a USAU person closed the gate, and we're like, "Yeah, this isn't an entrance for fans."
Oh yeah,
and somebody filmed that.
I don't know if that's what I did hear. There were like some parking problems on day one, or like I don't remember. Anyway,
well, so what happens is day one, everybody's tournament starts and ends roughly at the same time.
Sure.
So everybody tries to get in and out of the parking lot at the same time, and it is a gigantic traffic jam. It's not as much a problem on the other days because people's rounds end at different times. But on day one, it is like this every time. We had a best tweets article every day, and one of them was, I believe LP, who's on Being Ultimate right now, said, I have accepted that I'm going to die in the Nationals parking lot because people are just sitting in line for forever. So it's become part of the San Diego Nationals experience.
Anyway,
bring some board games or something. What was that game you used to play in the car? Space something or other?
Oh yeah. I don't know, the one where you play on your phone. I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember what it's called.
Do that in the car. Better be prepared.
Okay, so logistics. They were fine. It was, with us doing 2 streams, it was a lot of work to set up this year, but the facilities people were really nice, and we were able to get the code to the gate in the morning so we could show up at 6 a.m. before anybody was at the fields and start setting up for the streams for the day. So no major issues. They like randomly changed fields at the last minute for the third place games, and that caused some issues with our filming. But I think it's a big undertaking, especially with 2 venues. You've got the main fields, and then you've got the championship stadium, and sort of managing all that is challenging. But I thought that USAU did a good job overall with logistic stuff, considering how difficult it was this year. For one thing, they couldn't get any equipment people to drop off tables and chairs and things like that at the high school stadium for semis and finals. No one would do it. No one has drivers. So, post-COVID, worker/supply chain issues were prevalent even at nationals. But COVID was not an issue at nationals, Keith.
So it wasn't at the tournament, but it felt like one when I wasn't at the tournament. You know what I mean? Like, it was a reminder. It was kind of like you were in a bubble at the tournament, and then we'd go somewhere and you had to put your mask on, or our housing situation was very unusual, and so that stuff there, it was like, oh, this is still a thing. But at the tournament, it was not, which was a breath of fresh air that I enjoyed.
Yeah, I mean, dealing with like the logistics of COVID stuff felt almost impossible because the rules for close contact, which would mean that if somebody got a breakthrough case of COVID, because our staff was fully vaccinated, like we checked everybody's vaccine cards. So the Ulti-World team fully vaccinated. And we did lose one camera operator before the tournament because she had COVID. She's doing fine, and that's great, but it sucked that she couldn't come, and, hated to have to say you can't come. But if somebody gets a breakthrough case, anybody who's had close contact with that person has to be removed from the event. This is following USAU policies until they get a negative PCR or rapid antigen test, which is hard to get. So you're typically going to take at least a day or two to get the results for those things. And the thing is, close contact means you're within 6 feet of a person for 15 total cumulative minutes in a 24-hour period, regardless of whether you're indoors, outdoors, masked, unmasked, or anything. So, Keith, if you and I were sitting side by side on the scaffolding commentating a game, you've had a close contact. And so trying to manage that and like avoid the risk of having the team get like totally derailed by a COVID positive felt basically impossible because you couldn't realistically do work without being within 6 feet of other people for 15 minutes in a 24-hour period, even if you're outdoors, where the risk is, of course, extremely low of any COVID transmission. So anyway, luckily it nothing happened. And I didn't hear of anything happening with teams either. So that's great news. That's great news.
I have a question for you that isn't on our list. I'll add it to you. But it's a topic that I feel like is near and dear to your heart. How did you feel about application of cards and safe play, particularly during those semis and finals? So
the observer topic. The observers didn't have a good weekend. Let me just put that out there straight away. I thought there were a lot of missed calls. I thought there were a lot of missed line calls. I thought just in general, there was a lot of just kind of rusty performances from observers. Shayla Harris got a like egregiously bad card in, was that finals or semis?
That was in the semifinals.
That was in semis. She got carded on a play where she was on defense and the offensive player basically ran into her as she had beaten her offensive player to the disc. And then
I would have more understood a dangerous card for the offensive player.
Yeah, it was still a disaster. Apparently there was a misunderstanding. I actually talked to Shayla about it a little bit at my disc golf tournament on Monday. There was a misunderstanding. They thought that the offensive player had called the foul, but actually it was Shayla that had called the foul. It was kind of a mess. And I thought the observers on the whole just didn't really have a great weekend. There were a lot of missed calls. There was a lot of like calls that were sent back. Like it just didn't feel like they were ever really like helping the game move along in like an effective way, to be honest. Overall, though, I do think that I was happy to see more cards going up for dangerous plays. So I will give them credit on that point because I think that that's the right thing. Obviously, they're going to miss some of those calls. And, I don't love to see that, but people make mistakes. That's just how it is. I like to see that it seems that maybe there's been a point of emphasis on trying to more quickly address and card heavy contact. Because I've been beating this drum for so long, Keith. You know that.
I've heard that drumbeat many a time, and I've been rewatching the games, watching the finals. I missed a lot of the semis because I was flying from California back to Connecticut, and so I'm rewatching those. And like there was an example where a boot squad player picked up a yellow card, and Evan Lepler remarks that he feels like usually he sees a blue card in that situation, and I was surprised. Do you feel like you saw more yellows for dangerous plays for individuals? Like,
I feel like I heard about them a little bit more. I mean,
it seems like the right application, and I do feel like I usually see blue cards.
My view of the Ultimate Tournament as very much a narrow slice of what is on my streaming field most of the time. But yeah, look, a yellow card, until there's been more than one given out, a yellow card is the same thing as a blue card, basically. So I prefer, if somebody makes a play that's not just a ticky-tack, like, you intentionally fouled on the mark, like on a power position or something, where that's like, don't do that, that's ticky-tack, blue. If somebody like makes a hard contact, backpack, blows out somebody's legs, anything like that, there should be a yellow card. There just should be a yellow card. Like, do not do that again or you're going to be tossed from the game. Somebody did get tossed from the tournament, or from a game in the tournament. I forget what team. Was it Lawless?
I think I heard about that too, and think I heard it was Lawless.
I didn't,
but I don't know.
Reporting somewhere. I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. I didn't see the plays unfold, but there were enough yellows that somebody got 2 of them and got tossed. And
that's what we should be doing, right? Is saying we're not going to take this kind of behavior and try and incentivize people to change it. Just another rules note. We don't have to have a whole conversation about it necessarily, but saw a lot, and I mean a lot, of traveling at Nationals. A lot. I mean, I was watching two teams warm up, and me and the person staying next to me were dividing up the teams to count how many players were traveling, either consecutively or not traveling consecutively. I did not get above 3, I think, before a player traveled on the drill. Like an unmarked drill.
Nobody calls them, Keith. Nobody's calling travels anymore.
Right. I mean, I kind of talked about it a little bit on stream. Like, at what point do we change the rules to meet the players? And maybe players are just kind of doing that since we get to call the travels. But then you get into a murky water where it's not quite clear what is your travel and what isn't. Like, if everybody's just like, well, we're not going to call it, and then you call it when it matters, people are going to get upset. So, like, I don't know. I thought Jay Clark's idea was a bit silly. Like, I didn't think it was going to be something that ever really came into my thought as like, oh, this is a real thing we could do, where you have like a disc width of pivot space or whatever. But people are definitely not holding a pivot foot, especially with the way that pivoting has kind of changed over the years with the offhand development. There's a lot of trouble.
Well, I mean, honest to God, Keith, is it plausible that one of the ways to counter the influx of dominator sets and like little small ball resets and stuff is to call the travels?
If they're there, sure. But like,
I'm not saying to make
suddenly,
it up.
How many times as a team do you have to call travel on a team that's actually traveling for people to get upset at you?
It doesn't take much, like literally twice, 3 times.
So, I mean, all of a sudden your spirit scores look like zeros because the other team wouldn't keep their pivot foot. You know what I mean? Like,
that's why I think it should be an observer-initiated call. I've been saying this for a long time. I think observers should call it, and they can call a tight game or they can call a loose game, but like, make it external. No one wants to watch the feet while they're trying to play defense, man.
And some travels don't feel like they gain an advantage, but some really do. Like, being able to reset your power after a fake really quickly is really valuable in a way people don't realize. It's not all about distance. It's not all about gaining yardage or whatever.
In fact, I would say it's more about body weight shift and like whether you're able to like load that flick up correctly.
And I think that the way that people move as throwers has changed a lot, and it's re-emphasized how important it is to be able to set that power base because of all of the shoulder shimmy kind of moves and the offhand fakes and pivots. Like, I think that has changed the way that throwers move, and traveling has thus changed as well.
Okay, I have a critical question that we should have talked about earlier and didn't, and we really need to. Should Pony, when they won the flip, have elected to receive instead of pulling to start the game against Ring, a game in which each team had 1 break in the first half and 0 in the second half, and they lost on serve?
I am not somebody who, as a coach, I like to think much about pulling, receiving, all that kind of stuff. I just want to get out there, do our thing. But on the one hand, I like to say like it's pretty hard to predict that you're going to get basically a breakless game. On the other hand, you do know the caps are 85 minutes. As much as you may hate it, that is what they are. And you do know that. And you've also seen plenty of games not get to 15. So, I think you got to think about it. I think you probably have to take O first. But I don't know. It's context dependent. Like, I think that the key is being able to put your best foot forward. Like, that's the thing that I want the most. I want to get whichever unit I feel best about in that matchup on the field. So, I understand if Pony was like, we think our defense is going to be great in this game. Maybe that's a miscalculation on their part. I don't know, but
hard to argue with that given the way they played the
safe.
semi.
I mean, most people want to receive at a half, right?
I think you see why it's basically a contraindicated strategy to pull. Like it is just actively the worst choice because you put yourself in a position to lose the game on equal breaks and instead of being able to win the game on equal breaks. Why would you choose that? You should never choose that, right? It's like
giving up a half point.
It's like when you do flip 2 discs, you should always call same in case there's some microscopic advantage that the 2 discs are going to land on their back 50.1% of the time. You're more likely to get same than different. Does it really matter in the grand scheme? Probably not. Is it the reason Pony lost the game? No, but it wasn't the right decision. It's like not going for it on 4th down. Seriously.
I get it. We don't, and ultimately maybe we need the little hand guy, but although not that there's that many situations to make decisions about, but
sure, you want to trust your defense. I get that. But I think that, you have to put yourself in the position to win the game when the teams are playing at as high a level as they were.
It's fair.
It's a tough way to go out.
I'm sure the Pony coaches are still think about it.
You have to be, right? And
gotta be at this point.
Isaac Saul in his tweet thread, which I would recommend people go check out. No one second guessed it. I asked Brian Jones directly about it. He said, no, we felt like we were, giving up breaks with our O-line earlier in the season when we started games on offense. And we really thought our D-line has been doing a great job all tournament. And we felt like, if we get that break advantage in the first half, then that's a really big advantage in the second half because now they've got to come back, at least 2 breaks more than you to win. And then that is true. But I think you see why, you can end up in the lurch. And it's got to be brutal for Pony to play that good of an offensive game and lose. And had they started on offense, they would not have lost.
I'm sure the O-line is not happy about
it. Very interesting stuff. I mean, I feel like we could talk for another 3 hours about Nationals. We'll have more next week, of course.
There are a lot of stories that we weren't able to get to.
Yeah. More next week, of course. Send us your thoughts. deeplook@ultiworld.com, @deeplookpod on Twitter. And make sure to join us for our subscriber bonus segment where we talk video production, live streaming, Ultiworld, ESPN, and how things have changed over time since we first started First time we streamed, Keith, was 2013 College Nationals.
I remember it.
We'll talk about it. So, ultiworld.com/subscribe to become a subscriber. Help us get to our stretch goal of 500 new subscribers by the end of the month. And have a very happy Halloween, everybody.